Hi there. Hi, Pam. Hi, Kimmy.
Hi.
Hi there.
Hi there. Hi, Pam. Hi, Kimmy. And I've got Kimberly behind me.
Hi.
We're just setting up. We've got all the PowerPoints queued up.
Hi there.
Hi. Hi there. Hi, Pam. Hi, Kimmy. That's Kimmy.
Hi.
And I've got Kimberly behind me.
Hi.
Yeah, she's in my back. We're just setting up. We've got all the PowerPoints queued up.
Hi there.
Hi there. Hi. Oh, that was feedback from the YouTube stream, so I closed it out.
Okay.
So, okay. All right. Sorry, guys, for the feedback. We had the YouTube stream live in the background and it was giving feedback.
Oh, that's okay. I was just about to email you and be like, there's a weird loop happening.
All right. We've got Gonzalo joining us now. It's just the four of us right now in the meeting. And then Pam, I was going to start the recording after the swearing in, but let me know if I should hit it just before so we can include it.
I don't have any preference or feelings either way, but I don't know.
Maybe it will. Maybe actually it will be nice for them to have that kind of
Yeah.
documented if they wanted to show it. So I don't think there's an issue. So I will start the recording in just 5 minutes or so. So
Sounds good.
Gonzalo, you can come on and test if you'd like.
Sounds good. I'm going to run to the restroom. I'll be right back.
Sounds good, Pam.
Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yep, and I see you on the Spanish line, so thank you for being early, Gonzalo. We don't know how much participation we'll get, but we know that you've got it covered.
Thank you.
So there will be a short portion in the meeting where the chair, Alex, will ask you to give the instructions on the screen. And we will also show it, of course, on the screen here. But that will be your cue to just come on briefly and give the instructions in Spanish verbally.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you, Gonzalo.
Yes.
Is my arch facing the right way?
It is not, Pam.
Okay, go. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, how about now?
It's good.
Okay, thank you.
So oh, did Pam turn off her video?
I did for now, yes. Good evening, everyone. I wanted to welcome and thank our new commissioners for logging in on time for your swearing in. It looks like we are waiting for 2 more commissioners. So if you don't mind, I am going to wait for them for as long as I can so that we can swear everybody in together as a group. We have until the 6 o'clock meeting to wait, but hopefully we did get confirmations from everybody. So hopefully they will join us shortly. And once they do, we can get started with your oath taking. So thank you very much for your patience. Great. I understand we have everybody present. So you should have received oath forms in the mail sent from our office. You can follow along on the oath form. For those who have been on a commission before, you'll be familiar with this process. At this time, I will ask everybody, you can turn on your cameras and unmute your mics so we can see each other. And if you have your oath form, go ahead and pull that out. And if you don't, it's okay. You'll just repeat after me. So I'll give you a couple of seconds. See everybody's faces. Welcome. It's great to see everybody.
Hi, I'm going to be the first to speak.
Hi.
Hello to all.
Hi.
Ray, where are you? I want that sunrise.
This is not far from Half Moon Bay. It's a north drive from Half Moon Bay. So
Beautiful.
yeah, thank you.
So if everybody who has their video turned on, who wants it on, and has your mic on that wants it on, that's great. I'm going to get started. So I will.
Hey, Pam, I'm
Hi.
sorry to interrupt. It's Alex. Good evening, everyone. Rudy Espinoza, I don't see him on this call. Am I not seeing
Oh,
Rudy on here?
you might be right, Alex.
Somebody need to send him a little text.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I counted
6,
10
7,
or 9.
8. Okay. Okay.
But go ahead.
Yeah, we
I'll
did.
give you a heads up, Pam.
But we have 8 minutes. If everybody doesn't mind, I would love to wait for him so that we
I
could
don't
do this all
mind.
together.
We have a quorum,
We'll
but
give
we'll wait.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm back on
Okay,
mute.
thank you. Thank you.
I'm gonna refill my water glass. I'll be right back.
Alrighty. All right, I understand that Rudy is in perfect timing. Let's see, is he on the call?
Yes, I am right here.
Oh, awesome. Great. Welcome. Okay, take two. So everybody who wants to have your video on and your mic on, we welcome you to do that now. And we have 2 minutes to spare before the meeting, so I'm going to get started. I'm going to ask everybody to please raise your right hand with me. And then you're going to repeat the oath after me. And let's begin. I, please state your
I,
name,
Ray Brown,
I, Lou Covey,
I, Megan Gardner,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
swear
that I will support and defend
that I
that I
will
will
support and
support and
defend
defend
the Constitution of the United States
the
the
Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
I'm getting some strange feedback.
And the Constitution of the State of California.
And the Constitution of the United States of California.
I think there's a little bit of a lag, so I'll just power through. Against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear
true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the
Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation
obligation
Freely.
without any mental reservation
without any
any
mental
mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
faithfully
discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
faithfully discharge the duties about which I am
about
to
to
enter.
enter.
Congratulations, we made it through.
Wow, congratulations, everyone.
I'm sorry for the dog in the back.
I like that. He was pledging also,
He was there.
or she.
Yeah, he's a proud Redwood City resident.
Love it, love it.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Alex Kojikian. I'm the Assistant City Manager here with the City of Redwood City. Our meeting, I'm going to call the meeting to order since we haven't elected a chair and vice chair yet. So I'll just be kicking it off, and that'll be later on in our agenda this evening. I want to first welcome everyone and first say congratulations to all of you who were appointed to the Advisory Redistricting Committee. I really look forward to working with all of you over the next, I think it's like 5 or 6 months in total of the work that we are going to embark on starting this evening. So just really quickly, for those who are tuning in, because this is a public meeting, so it's not only being recorded, so just to be aware, the Zoom meeting is being recorded. It's also live streaming on YouTube. I believe it's also streaming on the city's website. And is this on channel 26 and 27, Pam, or is that just the recordings?
It's streaming on YouTube and yes.
Not on
Okay.
channel 26 or on the cable channels, Alex, just YouTube.
Correct.
Okay, great. So we're just on YouTube, and that just provides the record for all of us here. And then for anyone that wants to check in and see everything that we've been discussing and talking about, they can catch up just by viewing the recordings as well. And so with us this evening is our advisory redistricting committee members, and then also its staff, and then also the city's consultants from redistricting partners as well. We're offering Spanish translation for all of our ARC meetings through a dial conference line. And if you wish to hear the meeting in Spanish, anyone can dial 669-900-6833. The meeting ID is 346-830-8566. And the password is 1017. Again, the phone number is 669-900-6833. The meeting ID is 346-830-8566. 830-8566, and the password is 1017. Instructions are also shown on the screen. And so I'm going to now turn it over to our translator, and I believe it's Gonzalo Cordova. I see he's on this meeting as well, to give these instructions in Spanish as well. Gonzalo?
Thank you, Alex. Muy buenas noches a todos. Estas son las instrucciones para escuchar la reunión en español. Por favor, llame al 669-900-6833. El ID de la reunión es 346-830-8566 con la contraseña 1017. Nuevamente, si usted desea escuchar esta reunión en el idioma español, puede ingresar con el número 669-900-6833 o a través de Zoom con la reunión número 346-830-8566. La contraseña es 1017. Gracias. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Gonzalo. And so just for my clarity, from my team, the Spanish translation, that'll be continuing for the entire meeting, correct? So that anyone in the future, Spanish speaking resident or anyone who might be interested, they can always be able to watch this meeting take place in Spanish. Is that correct, Pam?
That's correct, Alex.
Great, thank you. So now I'm going to go back to Pam, and I'm going to ask her to take roll of our newly seated Advisory Redistricting Committee members. Go ahead, Pam.
Thank you, Alex. When I call your name, please answer here or present. Committee member Amy Buckmaster.
Present.
Committee member Dr. Manuel Peña.
Present.
Committee member District 3, I'll announce the district. District 3, Louis Covey.
Here.
Committee member District 4, Rudy Espinosa.
Present.
Committee member District 5, Hyla Lacefield.
It's on mute.
Hi, Hyla. If you can answer present, that would be great. Maybe she has problems with her audio.
Here.
There you go. Thank you. Committee member for District
Can
6,
you hear me?
Megan. Yes, we did. Thank you, Hyla. Committee member for District 6, Megan Gardner.
Present.
At large, committee member Ray Brown.
That would be present.
Thank you. At large committee member Daniela Gasparini.
Present.
Thank you. At large committee member Lisa Hicks Dumansky.
Present.
Thank you. Committee member at large Esther Selk.
Here.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Pamela. I appreciate you taking that roll call. So now I'm just going to go ahead and I'll introduce our city staff members who are on the call today. I'm Alex Kojikian, Assistant City Manager, and I'm project lead on the redistricting initiative. So you'll be seeing a lot of me over the next few months. Then we have City Clerk Pam Aguilar with us, who you just heard from on the roll call. We have our City Attorney's Special Consultant, Alexandra Barnhill, who you'll hear from today. We have our Communications Manager, Jennifer Yamaguma, who will be presenting as well. We have Kimberly Daniels, who's our Management Analyst, and she's been really supporting us throughout this entire process, getting everything set for this Advisory Redistricting Committee and our entire initiative here. And then we have Assistant City Clerk, Jessica Dominguez as well. And then in addition, the city's demographer consulting firm, Redistricting Partner staff is here with us today. I see Kimmy Shigatani on the call, and then I don't see Chris, but Kimmy, are you just on for right now? Okay, great. So we got Kimmy with us today. So now I'm going to move on to item 4, which is public comment. So at this time, we'll take all public comment. Instructions for public comment are on the screen, and use the raise hand feature to request to speak. If you are calling in, press *9 to request to speak. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. I'll now turn it over to City Clerk Pamela Aguilar to facilitate any type of public comment that we have this evening. Pam?
Thank you, Alex. I don't know if we have any public members out there. But if anybody is joining us from the public and would like to make public comment, we ask that you raise your hand now and keep your hand raised in order to be recognized to make public comment. And I think it is just staff and the committee. I don't see any raised hands, so I won't go any further with the public comment spiel. Alex.
Okay, great. So I guess now we're moving on to the next item on our agenda, which is introductory trainings. And so training will first begin with a presentation from Alexandra Barnhill, our consultant from our city attorney's office. And then it'll be followed by a brief presentation from Pam Aguilar, our city clerk, and then our communications manager, Jennifer Yamaguma. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll hand it off to Alexandra.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Good. Seeing some thumbs up. So my name is Alexandra Barnhill, and I am special counsel to the city of Redwood City. I am a senior partner at the law firm Jarvis, Fay, and Gibson in Oakland, California. It's a boutique municipal law firm that specializes in representing cities and special districts. I act as general counsel to a few small districts, including your very own Mosquito and Vector Control District in San Mateo County. And I also represent cities handling land use and CEQA matters. At the next slide. So today we're going to be covering these topics on the slide. And this is an introductory training. This is not your AB 1, 2, 3, 4 training, which you may have heard about. That is an in-depth training that's approximately 2-hour training required within 1 year of taking public office, and then every 2 years thereafter. But today we're just going to be handling some introductory discussions so that you can understand and be aware of the basic rules that are going to govern your behavior as you're part of this committee. Next slide. And next slide. So you may have seen public officials behaving badly in the news and in the headlines. And it tends to catch people's attention. About 15 years ago, the state auditor investigated public corruption claims and found widespread ethics violations in cities and special districts. And as a result, AB 1234, the in-depth training that I was discussing earlier, was adopted by the legislature in order to ensure that local government officials are aware of their various laws that govern their actions and then act with more transparency for the benefit of the public. The top headline here about the city of Bell, I don't know if you recall this particular scandal, but it illustrates that these problems still exist. There, the former mayor, Robert Rizzo, pled no contest to 69 ethics violations, including misappropriation of public funds, contractual conflicts of interest, which we'll talk about tonight, falsification of public records, and also hiding public records, which was a new one to me. And while the Bell scandal was an extreme case, it does illustrate that these cases make headlines and that they can shape the public's impression of their local government. Next slide. So what is the golden rule? The public expects their local officials to act ethically, whether or not doing so might be required by the law. And in this particular headline, the public is always scrutinizing their public servants, and there can be consequences for unethical behavior. In this instance, a mayor's neighbor was opposed to a proposed new dog park and had put up a no poop zone sign in his yard. And the mayor picked up a bag of poop and tossed it onto their neighbor's yard. And that mayor was fined for littering, but when the surveillance tape became public, that affected their ability to lead, and they resigned in response to public demand. So the idea of this training is really just to give you some guidance to help avoid both legal and ethical pitfalls and help keep you on the right path. So when faced with a difficult issue, we suggest you take an ethical gut check. And this is a test that basically shows there's a hierarchy of steps to resolving dilemmas. You need to start with what's legal. Obviously, that creates the floor for behavior. And you need to remember to consider both state laws, which we're going over today, as well as local rules, which may have higher requirements than what state might require. And then you need to go beyond that and think about whether or not your actions are consistent with both your community's values as well as your own. And finally, we recommend that you take a look at the issue objectively and evaluate it from an outsider's perspective, like a news reporter would. If you don't like the way it would read in the headlines, then don't do it. And if you're still unsure, ask for help. So as we go through this presentation, I will highlight a few headlines for you to help make these examples of laws more relatable. Our first area is the Brown Act, and that's what's known as the Government and the Sunshine Law. The main rule from the Brown Act is that all meetings of legislative bodies of a local agency need to be open and public unless an exception applies. And the purpose of this is to conduct the public's business in the open and give public access to the decision-making process. And when the legislature adopted this law, they stated, the people of the state do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for the people to know. The people insist on remaining informed so they may retain control over the instruments they've created. Next slide. The center of the Brown Act requirements is when there's a meeting. So let's define a meeting. It's any congregation of a majority of legislative body members at the same time and place to hear, discuss, or deliberate on an item within its jurisdiction. I actually think the definition saying same time and place is a little misleading because, as we'll go over, things can happen over a series of events. But in essence, meeting should only be held when a majority or a quorum of your body is present. So that's 50% plus one. You have an 11-member board. So your quorum or majority is 6 individuals. And a legal meeting occurs when there's deliberations or actions taken by 6 or more of you at a publicly noticed meeting that has an agenda that the public has the ability to attend and participate. An illegal meeting is going to occur when a majority of your ARC members communicate outside of a noticed meeting, such as behind closed doors, and that can occur either directly or indirectly. So how does an illegal meeting occur? It can occur outside of a properly agendized meeting in a couple of different ways. For example, it could occur directly, like if 6 of you or more got together at the Starbucks immediately prior to heading into this meeting and discussed the agency's business, that would be an illegal meeting. It can also occur in more modern ways through technology. So for example, via email, if an email is sent between 2 or 3 of you and then is forwarded on to a couple others, all of a sudden you can have created a meeting outside of the proper context. And similarly with social media, for example, on Nextdoor, if people are talking about redistricting and you all are participating in that discussion, that would also be an unlawful meeting. Finally, a meeting can occur illegally through a series of events called a serial meeting. And there are 2 different types. The first is a daisy chain. This is occurring when member A goes to member B goes to member C, and so on. And through that process, you all develop a collective concurrence or sort of an agreement, or either a direct agreement, we're going to vote for X, or an agreement to agree, and that occurs outside of a public meeting. The other type is called a hub and spoke, and this involves an intermediary, usually a third party. For example, if the staff liaison came and communicated to a few of you and then went to a few more of you and said, 5 other ARC members are going to vote in favor of this particular map. Do you agree with that? And so by virtue of this third party, they've communicated the ideas of the other members and created an illegal meeting. So now that you know what a meeting is and when it's legal or not legal, what are you allowed to do? Is there anything that's not a meeting? And the answer is yes. There are instances where all or a majority of you can get together outside of a public meeting and it wouldn't be considered a Brown Act violation. For example, individual contact staff can contact you, the assistant city manager can contact you, for example, and provide background information or materials. That's not a violation. There can be transmissions of documents one way. You can also have scheduling communications where you all write to each other and say, let's try to find a time for a special meeting. There are also opportunities to get together at a public conference. So if the public is able to attend, you can attend too, such as the League of California Cities or another public meeting, such as the city council meeting. You could all attend that meeting as well. You can also be together socially. For example, if you all like the same music and wind up at the same concert, that's okay. But one caveat is that if you do so, you shouldn't group together or discuss ARC matters amongst yourself. So with the Brown Act, you're going to need to limit your discussion to only the items that are on the agenda. There are some narrow exceptions for brief announcements about actions that you've taken in the community or questions for clarification, but you want to avoid going into any lengthy discussions and certainly any voting on any items that are not appearing on the agenda. And you also need to allow for public comment. You just did that. Typically you do it on each agenda item as well as on any item within the agency's jurisdiction to allow the public their opportunity to not only have access to the decision-making process by listening to it, but the opportunity to influence it as well. The consequences of violating the Brown Act can be significant. They could be a misdemeanor if the action was taken to intentionally deprive the public of the opportunity to participate. You can also result in invalidation of whatever action was taken. And of course, there's the opportunity for damages and attorney's fees. In our experience, an award of attorney's fees tends to be relatively likely in the event of a successful Brown Act violation, whereas on the flip side, if a public agency successfully defends a Brown Act claim, the public agency very rarely will receive its attorney's fees. The standard is only if the lawsuit was clearly frivolous and totally lacking in merit. This means there's an incentive for the public to bring Brown Act challenges and to be looking to, find a violation. And there should equally be an incentive on your part to comply with the law. So to help you avoid becoming another headline, I've provided one here. In this instance, a court of appeal found that Merced County violated the Brown Act when their planning commission combined two action items into one. And so in this instance, the commission was considering approval of a subdivision project, and that was on the agenda, but they didn't mention that they'd also approve a related CEQA document with it. And the commission approved the project and adopted the environmental document at that meeting. That action was challenged successfully, and the court found that the failure to identify the CEQA action violated the Brown Act, and the court rescinded the project approvals. So they had to go and do the whole thing over again. The next area of law that we'll cover is conflicts of interest. This actually has several different laws within it, but they all have the common goal of making it unlawful to put your personal interests above the interests of serving the public. So the rule of thumb here is that you shouldn't gain a financial or personal advantage from your position. And the prudent approach to these issues is to err on the side of caution, avoid actions that could appear to be improper, and to consult with the city attorney's office early and often if you're concerned about an issue. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a meeting and had somebody lean over, 2 seconds before the meeting's about to start and say, hey, I've got, this situation. Do you think I can vote on this particular item? And, without a lot of time to be able to evaluate it, I'll have to give my most conservative advice. Whereas if we had time, I could have potentially found an exception that might apply. I see a hand up. Do we want to take questions now?
Can I?
Sure.
Okay, on that last slide, conflicts of interest, I'm going through the financial or disclosure forms. I have interest in 2 startup companies, but I have no idea what those things are worth. I own 10% of one and 1/4% of another. How do I report that on the forms?
So you're talking about the Form 700s, and that's something we'll touch on briefly as we go into this.
Then I'll shut up.
No, it's fine. You can work with the city attorney's office on it, but I don't know if you've looked at the forms. The forms do have ranges, so they don't ask you to pinpoint values of things. They're just sort of ranges. And so you'll have to give your best good faith effort at what the value is.
Okay.
If there's no public valuation.
That makes it simple. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so we were about to start this slide. So this is section, we're going to talk about 3 different types of legal doctrines. We're going to talk about section 1090, which relates to making contracts. We're going to talk about the Political Reform Act, which relates to making governmental decisions where you have a financial interest potentially involved. And lastly, we're going to talk about common law bias, which requires you to be an impartial decision maker. So the basic rule on section 1090, which comes from the government code and relates to contracts, is that public officials are absolutely prohibited from having a financial interest in a contract made by them or their board. And so this is the anti-self-dealing law. It can be a little abstract. So for example, let's say a city council member owns a local car dealership and the city needs to purchase new vehicles. Assume for the purposes of this hypothetical that purchasing vehicles requires city council approval. Then entering into a contract with the local car dealership would mean that the council member is involved in both their public and their private capacity. They're in their public capacity as making a decision for the city as a city council member, and their private capacity as the owner of the car dealership. Because they're on both sides of the contract, the law views that as improper, even if the contract is objectively fair, or even if it's a better deal than for the city, then you could get elsewhere. The law simply won't allow that type of contract to be approved. And because the rule is an absolute prohibition, it means that it's not enough for the individual who has the conflict to step down or recuse themselves. The city is just blanketly prohibited from entering into that agreement. So when you're applying section 1090, it applies very, very broadly. The definition of public officials includes all of you all, it includes staff, it includes consultants to a certain extent. So it's very broad. The meaning of financial interest is also very broad. Oftentimes there's thresholds, you have to have a certain level of financial interest or else it's considered de minimis or, not relevant for these laws. But section 1090 is different. They say 1 penny is enough. And as we discussed, the prohibition is absolute, meaning that this individual's conflict extends to the entire board. And the consequences are also pretty severe. The contract that, if it was entered into, would be considered unenforceable. The official has to return any money received. So if we use our example of the car dealership, the city council member would have to return the money as part of that contract. Interestingly enough, the city doesn't have to return the car, so the city gets a windfall in that scenario. And if the violation is willful, it's considered a felony and can result in permanent disqualification from office. So with that said, there are some exceptions. They're too technical to get into tonight, but if you think you might have a conflict, contact the city attorney's office and we can help walk you through it. Now, we don't want you to become another headline, and in this one, the American Indian Model School in Oakland lost most of its students and was threatened with losing its charter because of violations of Section 1090 conflict of interest laws. Here, a former school board director broke the law by paying himself $3.8 million in school funds by awarding school contracts to companies that he owned for construction and classrooms rental services. The director basically claimed that he hadn't violated the law because he disclosed these conflicts and recused himself. But as you now know, that's not enough. It's still a violation of the law. And so this shows that, violating these laws not only affects the individual wrongdoer, but also, in this case, the educational opportunities for a lot of students. Our next area that we will cover is financial conflicts of interest in decision-making. And this comes from the Political Reform Act. Here, the rule is that a public official has a disqualifying conflict of interest and may not make, participate in making, or in any way attempt to use his or her official position to influence a governmental decision in which he or she knows they have or has reason to know that they have a disqualifying financial interest. So this law prohibits officials from making decisions that could help or harm them financially. Before we were talking about contracts, this doesn't necessarily need to have a contract. It could be any decision that you're making as an official. So for example, if a city council member owned agricultural land just outside the boundaries of your city, and they were going to vote to annex that property into the city's boundaries and then rezone it as residential land, it's reasonably foreseeable that that type of a decision could affect the value of that real property of that council member. So that council member should not participate in that decision. And as I said, these come from the Political Reform Act, and the Fair Political Practices Committee, or FPPC, is the entity that helps establish regulations that implement this law. They actually offer a free advice line, like a hotline that you can call to get informal advice if you're concerned about a potential conflict of interest. They further will offer formal written advice, which you can rely on as a defense if there was any sort of challenge to the actions that you've taken. And typically you would get that by working through the city attorney's office to request a formal written opinion prior to taking action. So the financial interests that you need to be worried about are listed on this slide. They include interests in a business, real property, sources of income, not just your employer, but any source over $500 in the last year, sources of gifts to you, and personal finances, including your expenses, income, assets, liabilities. And these are the interests that you will list on your Form 700, which Mr. Covey mentioned earlier. And so, because you put it on your Form 700, hopefully they are top of mind as you look at agendas and figure out whether or not you have any financial interest involved. Also, a practice tip is that you have to consider not only your own financial interests, but those of your spouse and minor children. So some of these things can kind of sneak up on you if you're not paying attention. If a financial conflict of interest exists, what you're supposed to do is publicly identify the interest. So you'd say, I can't participate in this particular decision because my real property is within 500 feet, for example. You would step down from participating and state the reason. Then you would leave the room. You would have to leave the virtual room in this instance. We'd in my meetings, we've put people in a waiting room on Zoom and brought them back once the matter was over. And then you'll want to confirm for the record that these actions are reflected in the minutes. So make sure next time you're approving the minutes to take a look at that and show that it indicates that you took all of those steps. There are consequences of violating this rule as well. There can be administrative fines from the FPPC, typically $5,000 per violation. A civil action can be brought, and there's an incentive to do so because there's attorney's fees. It can also be considered a misdemeanor. Now, we don't want you to become another headline, and in this instance, a general manager of a community services district was fined $2,500 by the FPPC for voting for a proposed $7,000 repair project that involved some new valves and water mains within 500 feet of this individual's house. As I said earlier, typically the fine is $5,000, but it was reduced because in this case, the project was never built. So even though nothing actually happened, the FPPC still found it appropriate to fine this individual to prove the point. And our last area for conflicts of interest is common law bias. Here, the rule is that a public officer is impliedly bound to exercise the powers conferred on him with disinterested skill, zeal, and diligence, and primarily for the benefit of the public. As you can tell, this was not written by the legislature. This was written by a judge. And this bans an official from using their position for private gain. And the reason this one's significant is that it regulates both financial interests and personal interests. So the other ones, you had to have a penny or more of financial interest involved in order to create a conflict. In this case, it could just be personal animus involved. And so this kind of goes back to the very beginning of our presentation where we talked about taking an ethical gut check. If something seems fishy, it's kind of off, it may violate this rule. And to provide some examples of how this has come into play in case law, one instance was when an individual voted against a project that would have affected their ocean view from their rental home. And another was when an individual ghost wrote a letter attacking a project before it came before them as a decision maker. So common law bias, the remedy here, you can disqualify yourself or recuse yourself and not vote on the particular matter, but failure to do that would result in unwinding whatever transaction was just involved, giving up any money that you received, and the possibility of damages, including attorney's fees. Essentially, if your personal interests conflict with your official duties, you shouldn't participate. And here's a headline related to that. This is very recent, happened about this time last year. A neighborhood association was appealing the Sacramento Planning Commission's approval of a conditional use permit that would have allowed a Safeway gas station. And a council member who heard the appeal was very opposed to the project, and the developer sued, arguing that he was biased. They were successful, and they specifically argued that the council member tried to secure votes of other members, basically taking polls and trying to take temperatures of other council members, prepared talking points, advocating against the project for himself and other council members, coached the person appealing the project about how to bring the appeal, and also made the motion at the city council meeting to overturn the planning commission's decision. The court found that this had demonstrated an unacceptable probability of actual bias, which is the legal standard. And as a result, the developer was denied a fair hearing. So with that, we come to our last area of law, which is your parliamentary procedure, Rosenberg's rules. And this section is going to provide some detail about how to conduct an orderly meeting. So the city has adopted Rosenberg's Rules of Orders. These rules are practical, easier to learn, user-friendly, which is all good news for you because, as you may know, there are several different flavors of procedural rules, and the most common is Robert's Rules of Order, which are, some would say, antiquated and very nuanced and difficult to apply in practice. So you should be glad that you're able to follow Rosenberg's rules. Next slide. Rosenberg's rules focus on achieving public input through a process where you're going to tell the public what the body will do. You're then going to tell the public what the body is doing. And finally, you're going to tell the public what the body did do. And as we discussed with the Brown Act, the public expects transparency, and these parliamentary rules help allow that by signposting for the public the body's actions and making it easy to follow. So a high-level overview of proper meeting involves first making sure that there's a quorum. As we discussed, that requires a majority of you to be present plus one. So that's 6. Then the chair will lead the meeting and act as the leader, helping each of you get through the agenda. The agenda is your guide. So the agenda is really the key to all discussion that's going to be happening at the meeting. And when the meeting ends, it will end via adjournment. Now, the key question is, how do we consider agenda items? And there are steps that you can follow. The first is to call, the chair will call the agenda item by its title, and next give an opportunity to disclose conflicts and recuse yourself for all the reasons we just discussed. If there's a political reform act or potential bias, there's an opportunity before any substantive discussion happens, right after the agenda item is called, that somebody could announce, hey, I've got a conflict, I need to leave. Then staff will provide a presentation, and after the presentation is ended, there will be an opportunity to ask questions of staff. Next, the chair will open and receive public comment. We've talked about how important public input is and how, this is an opportunity for the public to influence the decision making and not just be witness to it. Once the public has had an opportunity to weigh in, you'll close the public comment and then bring it back to your board. The chair will ask for a motion on the item. And if somebody makes a motion, they'll ask for a second in order to take action on the agendized item. Then the chair would confirm what the motion was. And I really want to stress how important it is to confirm the motion. Oftentimes, as discussions get, detailed, you can sort of lose the thread of what was moved, or when somebody makes a motion and then somebody else tries to tweak it. Before you take a vote, make sure that everyone is clear on what the motion is. Sometimes staff will make a recommendation and people will just move staff recommendation. That's relatively easy because you can typically look right in your staff report and see that. But if people go, and do their own motion for whatever reason, it's important to confirm what the motion was. Then you'll invite debate amongst the ARC members to discuss, their points in favor or against the particular motion. And when the debate is concluded, the chair will call for a vote. Individuals, right now, because we're in Zoom land, every vote is a roll call vote. So you'll individually state yay or nay. There's not an opportunity to do secret ballots or, hide your vote or vote anonymously. Everyone votes out loud. And then the chair or the clerk will announce the vote. For example, saying the motion passed 9-2 with so-and-so and so-and-so opposed. So that it's clear for the record. Finally, that will end that agenda item. You'll introduce the next agenda item and start all over again. And for the most part, these steps seem simple, and they are. But at a long meeting or with a controversial item, skipping some of these steps or avoiding some of these steps can cause problems. So it's important to keep on track with following your parliamentary procedure. In my experience, I've been doing this for 15 years. Most of the time, people are able to get through meetings following the proper steps. Parliamentary procedure comes up a lot when you're trying to count votes, especially if somebody abstains, particularly if somebody abstains, but they didn't have a legal reason to do so. Generally, that's disfavored, and in some communities it's not allowed at all. So you'll have to check your local rules about that. But also if there's absences, or in your instance right now, you have a vacancy, so that may affect voting totals depending on how the vote thresholds are set up. So it can be difficult sometimes to count or figure out whether or not an item passed. That's a big area around procedural issues that trips people up. The other thing is the reconsideration. Sometimes you think about something and realize I didn't understand the motion, or something passed that I'm now realizing, I don't agree with anymore. You need to check your local rules, but oftentimes the only opportunity to reconsider an item is at the same meeting that the action was approved or disapproved. So just keep that in mind as you move through things, that it's better to say something when you get that gut feeling than to bring it up later, because you may miss your opportunity. And in case you thought that I would be unable to come up with a headline for parliamentary procedure, you would be wrong. Just last year, the city of Santa Barbara during the pandemic was considering a proposal to close the beaches on 4th of July. The city has a 7-member city council and 1 member was absent. 3 voted in favor of the proposal to close the beach. 3 voted against, wanting to keep the beaches open. Because the proposal to close the beaches didn't have a majority of votes, it was 3-3 or a tie, the beaches stayed open. With that, I am open for questions, and I appreciate the opportunity to present to you this evening. I see Esther raising her hand.
Will we get this presentation to look at again?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll email it out
Great.
Tomorrow so that you guys all have it for your records.
Thank you.
So are there any other questions before we move on? Alexandra, I just want to thank you so much for taking time. That was a great refresher just for me. I've heard it time and time again, but you did it very, very nicely and concisely. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And yeah, I'll hold on to the presentation myself as well. It's always a good reminder. So thank you.
Thanks.
So moving on to, I believe we're going into the communication, or is it BCC attendance policy? So Pam, I'll go ahead and have you present.
Thank you, Alex. I just briefly wanted to review the city's BCC attendance policy. The city does have an attendance policy that is applied to all boards, commissions, and committees. I believe we did send that out to all of the members. So hopefully you'll take the time to read it if you haven't already. But I just briefly wanted to go over the highlights. Because this committee scope and timeline is very tight, under a statutory time frame, we've already laid out all of the meetings that all of the members must attend in the short time frame before April 2022. And we've also sent that out to you. According to the city's BCC attendance policy, well, number 1, of course, your attendance is essential to the committee's success. And there is an expectation that you will attend the 6 meetings that we keep reminding you about, which is the 3 training meetings. Tonight's is the first, and we're all here, so yay, good for us. And then there's 2 more training meetings. And let me see if I could just pull those dates real quick, or if somebody has those offhand. I think the next meeting is July 28th, and I believe August 11th. So those are 2 more training meetings, which we expect all members to attend. And then there are 3 map drawing meetings, and I'm going to ask one of my colleagues to let us know those 3 dates. And those 3 dates you also must attend. Oh, I think I have the dates here. Hold on just a quick second. So though the map drawing meetings are October 20th, November 3rd, and November 17th. And in between the training meetings and the map drawing meetings later in the fall and winter, there's going to be a series of community outreach meetings, which will be held in each of the 7 districts. There's more flexibility with those 7 meetings. And in fact, we would like to limit the number of committee members who do attend so that we don't commit a Brown Act violation, because if there is more than a quorum of members there, we would have to actually notice those 7 community meetings. At this point, they are not notice meetings. They are meetings that are open to the public, and perhaps in one of our next meetings, we will determine which committee members will attend those 7 outreach meetings so that there isn't more than a majority. But we do expect that for those who are district appointees, that you will be at your own district's meeting. The one thing I just wanted to communicate about the attendance policy is, if you do know as early as now, given all of the meeting dates, that you will be absent, and we hope that's not the case, please let staff know as soon as possible, because the attendance policy does state that you cannot miss more than 3 meetings in a row, but we're hoping that we don't even get close to that threshold. But you also cannot miss more than 25% of your scheduled meetings. So we're counting the 6 meetings, the 3 training meetings and the 3 map drawing meetings. So of those 6 meetings, you cannot miss more than 1 meeting. So if you know that you are not going to be present, please let us know. And I would ask that you use the provision in the attendance policy that provides for a leave of absence for, I think, family leave, vacation, whatever the case may be. And that way we can have your, absence documented properly. So let me go back to that slide if there was anything else on there. I think that's it. And if you have any questions after reading the policy, or even now, if you have sort of lingering questions after what I've said, I'm happy to take those now.
Hey, Pam, one other thing I wanted to highlight just for the group here is that right now we're allowed, because we're a Brown Act body, as Alexandra kind of covered in the last presentation. And so we're allowed right now to do these virtual meetings because the governor has special emergency legislation in there. But that's coming up on September 30th, and he said he's not going to renew it. So we're going to have to, those last 3 meetings are actually going to be in person. We'll have to meet at City Hall and the City Council chambers. But what we will do is I know Pam and her team is working on a hybrid model for an in-person meeting, but then also being able to allow the public, if they'd like to participate virtually online with a Zoom. And we're already working on that for the City Council. We're preparing for that, but we'll have to do that for this body as well. So we'll all get to see each other in person. It'll just be this fall, I believe in the October timeframe, October, November.
No, thank you, Alex. That's a great reminder that that's coming up.
Is that it? Any questions for Pam? Okay, thank you, Pam. Appreciate that. So now moving on to communications, I'm going to ask our communications manager, Jennifer Yamaguma.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to go over a couple of things when it comes to communications. If you want to go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to start with media inquiries. And when it comes to the media, you should know that we do have some planned blog posts and some press releases and things of that nature, just because this topic and project is so important. And so a lot of information we'll be pushing to the media through the communications division. But I do want you to know that if you are contacted by a member of the media, just remember that there is no such thing as being off the record or anything where it's just between friends or that kind of thing. Many reporters have different tactics to try to get information to help get their story. So sometimes there might be a simple request for something that's actually connected to something else, and that's connected to something even different. So suddenly that little snowball turns into a giant avalanche. And so for that reason, it's really helpful if you do get contacted by the media, if you can reach out to me just to let me know and to let me know what kind of questions they might be asking or what information they're searching for. It's also important to have consistency with the information that we're sharing with the different media outlets, and to have a consistent voice to represent your committee. And so for that reason, the chair will act as the spokesperson for the group. And the good news is, if you aren't comfortable speaking with the media, you have absolutely no obligation to do so. I'm happy to speak with them on your behalf, and I work with reporters all day, every day. So we can provide guidance and advice on how to respond should you want to provide an interview or a statement. Next slide, please. So you each have a city issued email address, and the first thing that you learn when you go into communications or public information officer classes is you don't put anything in writing that you don't want in the front page of the newspaper. And remember that writing includes emails, texts, and social media posts. And so your email is subject to the Public Records Act, which means that if we did have a request that came in to see all email exchanges on a specific topic, we would need to provide them except under very specific and restricted circumstances. So please only use your city email address when you're doing anything that's related to the work of this body. This allows us to go in and search your emails so that we are in compliance with the California Public Records Act without you having to do so, and without you having to go through your personal email to try to distinguish what's personal and what's business related. So for those of you that might have a practice of kind of chatting about things that are happening at the city level with your friends on a personal email, you know, if somebody emails you something that's related to the work of this committee, then you should reply to them using your city address and have them put in a quick note just to say, please use your city address from this point forward. Thank you. And when it comes to social media, sometimes it's a real slippery slope. So we do have to remember that anything posted to social media is subject to the Public Records Act. And don't forget that everything on the internet lives forever. So especially in today's world where we're all really comfortable working remotely and having dialogue online, it's really easy to have information overload and for people in the community to try to understand, you know, who to trust or what is a good outlet. So I really encourage you to spread the word on anything that we've posted on our city official channels. If you want to retweet something or share something, then you'll be guaranteed to know that that's safe and that is appropriate. You have to be really mindful of how you might invite comments on posts that you may have on your own personal social media channels. So again, you want to be mindful that you're not expressing your own personal opinion on something, that you're not speaking out of turn for something that the committee has not had a formal action on that's already been publicly recorded. So this is a way where you really need to distinguish between your tone and what you're posting from a personal account on, a city or business account. And so if you are interested in using your social media to share information about this work, then you may want to consider actually having a dedicated city business account. So you'll be able to manage it much different than you would with your own personal account. And like I said, we do have a number of blog series and press releases posted on our editorial calendar that we're going to be posting to the community, and we'll have the website up to date. And so those are all really kind of easy ways for you to share something. And again, you don't have to have any obligation to share on social media, but should you choose to do that, that is a really tricky area if you're not very careful. So this is my contact information, and we are here to help you. So if you have any questions, then you can reach out at any time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate that. Any questions for Jennifer? Now would be the time to raise your hand. Okay, seeing, oh, Isla?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, I'm in the woods. It's a little hard. Regarding the social media, do I need to go back and delete posts, or are you just saying don't post anything going forward? I was a little unclear on that part.
If you have a post that would have anything related to a decision or an opinion on something that's going to happen with this committee, that might be something we want to take a look at. If it's just a post saying, I'm excited that I got appointed to this commission and I'm looking forward to good work in the future, that's probably fine. But if you have any that you think are in question, maybe we can take that offline and just take a quick look at them.
Got it, thanks.
And for sure, moving forward, just be, sharing links to meeting agendas or being able to share a timeline or something like that would be fine. It's best if you actually link it back to the city's website where people can find more information, and just keep it really brief and factual.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, great. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we're gonna move on to the next item, which is.
I think Esther had a question.
Oh, did Esther have a question?
I did, Alex, but it was actually one thing ago, and I just wanted to ask if there's going to be rules about vaccinations when we are meeting in person, and I'm sure that's going to come up later, but I just realized I had that question. Like when we're meeting in person in October, are there rules about people being in the space vaccinated versus unvaccinated?
So I know that we're working through as an organization right now. We have forms going on for city employees, and there are certain rules that we'll abide by, I believe, with the CDC, the California Department of Public Health. So all of that will be in place. Pam, correct me if there's anything else from a meeting standpoint, but I think we're going to be following all federal, state, and local, county, and local laws, basically, of how we'll be moving forward and meeting. Correct, Pam?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, great. And OSHA, by the way, that's the other agency in all of this too, just from a workplace standpoint. So I think once I say OSHA, I think that covers everybody for all the regulatory agencies. So we'll fall in alignment with everybody to make sure we're running safe meetings. Okay, so now we're getting to the time, item 6, committee chair and vice chair nominations and selections. So it's exciting, you guys. This is going to be your first time voting as a group. So that's really exciting. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll hand it off to our city clerk, Pamela Aguilar, who will facilitate the nomination process. We'll first be nominating for the chair, and then we'll ask the chair to run the nomination for the vice chair. Correct, Pam?
That's correct. And our office sent in an email a link to all of your colleagues, committee colleagues' applications, so that you could see each other's applications and maybe get to know a little bit about each other before making tonight's nominations and selection. So at this time, I'm opening the floor for anyone on the committee to make a nomination for your chair. You can nominate one of your colleagues and you can also nominate yourself. So if you would like to nominate somebody, please raise your hand and we'll take nominations at this time. Luca V has his hand raised. Do you have a nomination?
Yeah, I nominate Daniela Gasparini.
Thank you. We have one nomination for Daniela Gasparini. Do we have any other nominations?
Hello.
Hi, Amy. Hi, Amy.
Hi, sorry. I nominate Rudy Espinoza Murray.
Okay, so we have two nominations. We have Daniela Gasparini and Rudy Espinoza. Do we have any other nominations before? Oh, and then there's Daniela. Or Danny. Did you want to make a nomination, Danny?
Sure, I appreciate Lou nominating me as chair, but could I also second Amy's nomination of Mr. Rudy Espinoza?
You can. And so the process will be, I will just make one last call for nominations and then I'll close the floor for nominations. And the process will be that we will vote on each nominee in the order that they're nominated. And the person who receives 6 votes or a majority of the votes, 6 or more, will be nominated as, or will be selected as your chair. So, and so I'm just going to ask the members, you've heard the nominations, but you've also heard Danny's second of Rudy Espinoza. So I'm going to.
I see Esther's raising her hand.
Okay, go ahead.
I got dropped. So I just wanted you to know that I missed a good minute and a half. My internet just said goodbye. So was there any other instructions besides saying somebody's name to nominate them? I don't know anybody. So it's sort of a funny, like working in the dark. I don't know if I missed anything.
We got 2 nominations, one for Danny Gasparini and one for Rudy Espinoza. However, Danny is seconding the motion for Rudy to be chair. So just keep that in mind. And then the process is we will take a vote on each nominee in the order that they were nominated. And the person who gets 6 or more votes, a majority of votes, will be selected as the chair. And if there are no other nominations, I will close the floor for nominations. And then I will do a roll call vote. And when I call your name, please state the name of the person you wish to select as your chair. So you'll either state Danny Gasparini or Rudy Espinoza. You can only state one name. Whoever gets the 6 votes will be named the chair. And I will start with committee member District 1, Amy Buckmaster.
Rudy Espinoza Murray.
Thank you. Next, committee member from District 2, Dr. Manuel Pena.
Thanks. Everybody can call me Manuel. My vote's for Rudy Espinoza Murray.
Thank you, Manuel. I appreciate you letting us know that. Next, committee member from District 3, Luca V.
Daniela Gasparini.
Thank you. Committee member from District 4, Rudy Espinoza.
Rudy Espinoza Murray.
Thank you. Next, committee member from District 5, Hyla Lacefield.
Rudy Espinoza Murray.
Thank you, Hyla. Committee member from District 6, Megan Gardner.
Rudy Espinoza Murray.
Thank you. At-large committee member Ray Brown.
I will sustain. I don't know these folks and I haven't reviewed anything about them.
Thank you. At-large member Danny Gasparini.
Rudy Espinoza Murray.
Thank you. Committee member at large Lisa Hicks Dumansky.
Rudy Espinoza Murray.
Thank you. And committee at large member Esther Selk.
I also abstain.
Okay, give me one moment. So with 7 votes, with Ray Brown and Esther Selk abstaining, Rudy Espinoza is selected as your chair. And I will turn the meeting over to a committee member, Rudy Espinoza, to facilitate the selection of your vice chair. And I'm here to help if you need me to help.
Thank you. Very unexpected. I appreciate everyone who's presented in the meeting thus far and everyone who's my name in the hat. So I appreciate your vote of confidence. So now to continue on with the selection of the vice chair, are there any nominations from the floor?
I'd like to nominate Hyla Lacefield. Sorry, Rudy, it's Amy. Sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
Okay, so Hyla Lacefield is nominated. Is there a second?
I will second. This is Danny Gasparini.
Seconded by Danny Gasparini. Thank you. Are there any other nominations from the floor? Okay, seeing none.
Okay, so I will take a roll call vote. And in this case, because there's one nominee, when I call your name, please state your vote, yes, yes, no, or abstain. And Hyla must get 6 affirmative votes in order to be selected as your vice chair. This time I will start with committee member Manuel Pena. It would be yes, no, or abstain.
Had to unmute first. Yes is my vote.
Thank you. Committee member Louis Covey.
Abstain.
Committee member Rudy Espinoza.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee member Hyla Lacefield. Okay. Committee member abstain. Thank you. Thank you, Hyla. I'm recording your vote as abstain. You're having a little audio troubles. Committee member Megan Gardner.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee member Ray Brown.
Abstain.
Committee member Daniela Gasparini.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee member Lisa Hicks Dumansky.
Yes.
Thank you. Committee member Esther Selk.
Abstain.
Thank you. And committee member Amy Buckmaster.
Yes.
Okay. With 6 votes, Hyla Lacefield is selected as your vice chair. Thank you.
Well, congratulations, Rudy. Congratulations, Hyla. Look forward to your leadership for this committee and working with both of you closely and with the rest of the committee members. I'm now going to take a back seat. Rudy, this meeting's yours as the chairman of this meeting. And so you get to take on, I believe it's going to be item 7, the panel discussion and the role of committee members. Go ahead, take it away from here, Rudy.
All right. Thanks, Alex, for that. And this is unexpected, but I do appreciate, as I said earlier, your vote of confidence. So the next item of business on the agenda is a panel discussion, the role of committee members.
And so with this item, I'm going to ask our redistricting partners team to join us. And I believe Connie Malloy with Redistricting Partners will be leading this discussion. So Connie, welcome this evening. Welcome to the City of Redwood City's Advisory Redistricting Committee.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you, and what a big evening. Congratulations to all of you for your service. I think this is a really important role, and it just, you're just getting started, which is a big moment. Just, bringing back memories from when I was on a redistricting commission and those first challenging decisions that seem so simple, and yet you're walking into it really starting from scratch. So it only gets better from here. And this evening, we'll just be spending a few minutes bringing in a couple of folks who have been in your shoes, who have also served as redistricting commissioners in their case. In some cases, cities and states are doing committees as you are, but really it's essentially the same task at hand. And so our goal is to provide you with some reflections and advice and just an opportunity to ask questions about what lies ahead. So if I could ask someone from the city to help me with slides, let me just say one thing about this picture, which is, my entree into becoming a commissioner on the redistricting front was with the California's inaugural Citizens Redistricting Commission 10 years ago. And this photo was taken at the state capitol on the day that we finalized our maps. And it had been quite an intense process. We were essentially building the plane while we were flying it because we didn't have the benefit of so many redistricting committees and commissions back then. But I hope that you all get to gather safely in person and take a picture like this, given the work that lies ahead, that you really do get to celebrate the work that it will take to get to the finish line. We'll go to the next slide. So myself, I'm Connie Malloy. I was a member of the California Citizens Redistricting Commission, which was a 10-year term. Cynthia Dye will also be joining us. She was a fellow colleague of mine, also on the California Commission representing the Bay Area. Carlos Marquez was coming from San Diego, so very similar in terms of a city level commission. And I'll tell a little bit about each of the commissions that they served on, so you have that context as they join us. Next slide, please. So the California Commission, as you may know, the work that state level commission, that new set of commissioners is doing right now is actually the second time that California has had an independent citizen-led redistricting commission redraw all of its Assembly, Senate, Congressional, and Board of Equalization lines. It was the first time that it had been done when we did it 10 years ago. Prior to that, all the lines had been done with the real focus on incumbency, political parties. They'd essentially been drawn by politicians themselves working with consultants. And so this was going to the opposite extreme and putting it in the hands of everyday Californians, and explicitly forbidding that we look at any of that information that had been used in the past. There were 14 of us that were on that commission. 5 of us were Republicans, 5 Democrats, and 4 independents. And we had quite varied backgrounds. I knew nothing about redistricting before I joined the committee. My professional background is as an urban planner. I currently work in philanthropy, and none of us had redistricting experience. That was probably the thing we most had in common. Next slide. So Carlos was in the San Diego Redistricting Commission, and in their last cycle, San Diego had both the typical job, which is redrawing the boundaries for the existing districts, But because the city had grown so much, they actually needed to create space for an additional seat. So as you can imagine, that had an impact on all the seats that had historically been drawn. And given the kind of size and scale of San Diego, there was also a number of different communities to be able to balance in that process. There was a really vibrant African-American district. There were growing Latino and Asian populations, and also one of the state's strongest at the time LGBTQ districts that really had a history for deep political engagement and even kind of state level leadership that had emerged from this district. So it was, even though it was a local level commission, it was certainly not an easy task at hand. Next slide. Just to note, given that all of us served in the last round of redrawing lines, your commission, your committees this round, you have a unique challenge in that here we are meeting on Zoom. And so being able to create an inclusive public process in a way that is adapting to the times that we have, I think it has both some challenges and some really great opportunities that our panelists will speak with you about this evening. Next slide. So this is your chance to hear firsthand from some colleagues who are your greatest fans. We're thrilled to have more citizens playing these roles. And so I'll just ask to take down the slides. And I know that Cynthia and Carlos should be here as well on the line. And if the city is able to pin Cynthia and Carlos and myself, that would be great. Otherwise, I'll trust those of you who are committee members to figure out how to navigate so that you're able to see us as we're talking. Great, and we can take off the slides. And there's Cynthia, welcome. And I think Carlos should be turning his video on. And we can just completely take off the slide if you're able to. Wonderful. Oh, and there's Carlos. Okay, if we can pin Carlos as well, that would be wonderful. Or spotlight, whatever the lingo is. Okay, great. There we are. Glad you're able to join us. So these committee members were just selected their chair and vice chair. I wish them a congratulations, and I'm sure it brings back a lot of memories on each of your parts as you were stepping into your respective roles. And I would just love to hear a bit about what your motivations were. And I'll start with you, Cynthia. What made you curious and interested to serve as, in this redistricting capacity? And how was it similar or different than what you might have imagined?
Yeah, well, I was just your average ordinary citizen. I hadn't been involved in politics before, but, always voted, was always politically engaged. And when I heard about this opportunity to fix this problem that I first learned about in 5th grade, gerrymandering, I leapt at the opportunity and signed up. I definitely wanted to be part of the solution on that. It was surprising to be selected. There were, 36,000 Californians who applied for the first California Commission. And I think none of us really knew what to expect. We'd never done this before as a state. So one of the first things I think was just how much time it took and how much media scrutiny there was. But ultimately, other surprises were the lengths that people went to come and tell us about their communities, and sometimes traversing, the whole driving 7 or 8 hours to come show up at a commission meeting to make sure we had input about their communities.
How about you, Carlos? What motivated you to serve in this role? And I know that you were really young at the time you got appointed. I don't think most folks your age were really thinking about redistricting, much less applying.
Well, I also want to congratulate everyone on the leadership appointments and coming together for this really, important exercise in public service. I was young. I did not have gray hair before redistricting. I'm joking. It came about more recently, but I was appointed when I was 25 to the City of San Diego Redistricting Commission, which was citizen-led, and our appointing authority were 2 retired judges. As we heard earlier from Connie, the city had a tradition of independent redistricting by the time our commission was seated. So I had certainly read about, having worked in politics and in community organizing, the sort of like the culture in San Diego, and this idea that we could have a citizen-driven redistricting process. So redistricting wasn't completely foreign to me. The thing that really motivated me to throw my hat in the ring and try to get appointed was just really appreciating the fact that the communities from which I came, growing up Latino, poor, and LGBT, were not likely going to be represented, at least directly, in a real voting capacity, but for someone like me who could step up and sort of raise my hand and say, sure, I'm happy to serve. And so part of my motivation was to try to bring some voice and agency to communities that I had seen kind of on the margins for too long, particularly when it comes to the process of redistricting, which has incredible consequences for everyone, but pretty steep consequences for those who haven't really been engaged in their government. So that was really, for me, a motivating factor.
It's great to hear. So much of what you're saying also resonates with my experience. And I wonder, Cynthia, you have been, both from your own perspective as a commissioner, and then also because you have supported so many other commissions and committees to get up and running. What do you think about as the most important values for a redistricting committee or commission to be able to demonstrate in their work?
Yeah, so there are a number of values. One thing that was important for our commission, there were 14 of us, as Connie said. We were all chosen to be different, to represent, different parts of California and different communities in California. And at the same time, it was very important for us to act as one, to act as a single commission. We had a value around consensus, and that didn't necessarily mean that we all agreed, but it meant that everyone had their opportunity to speak and get their thoughts on the record. We had the opportunity to try to convince each other. And at some point, it became obvious what the will of the commission was. And then we would basically agree to move on because, we had discussed it at length, we had considered the options, and it became apparent what the will of the commission was. Something that's surprised a lot of people because in our case, where at the state level, partisan considerations were a bigger issue. Some of our votes required a supermajority vote. Some of them, required, just a majority vote, but we actually rarely voted, except on the maps themselves, which required that vote. We would just agree to move on because we wanted to operate by consensus and make it clear that at the end of the day, this is the will of the commission. Second value was transparency. That was something that, we were formed to kind of combat the smoke-filled back rooms of, political self-dealing. That was the case prior to the formation of the commission. So making clear that that the public had a seat at the table for all of our decisions and our deliberation, that they could see who would appear in front of us and who was trying to influence us and what they had to say, and then how we took that information in and made those decisions. So all of our meetings were in public. They were, had advance notice, a lot of pains to make sure that we were completely transparent in our decision making. And then finally, inclusion was another big reason why Citizens Commission was formed. That we were, drawing maps. The 14 of us were the decision makers, but we were doing this in collaboration with Californians who were providing very important input about their communities. And that's understanding that there are many parts of the state, and as Carlos alluded to, many communities that are not, don't have a tradition of engaging in government processes. And so, and as you know, California is a very diverse state. So how do we ensure public access to the commission and make it welcoming? So for example, we posted all of our materials on the website were available in 6 languages. We also arranged for simultaneous translation for key meetings where we knew that in most cases Spanish was going to be a dominant other language. We accepted testimony in multiple languages. It was helpful that many of us on the commission actually spoke other languages, and so we could help with that as well. But making sure that anyone who wanted to testify had that opportunity and had the ability to communicate in the way that was most comfortable for them.
Thank you so much for that. And, Carlos, from working at the local level, anything that you would add in terms of values that you felt were important for the city level, in your case, commissioners, to be able to demonstrate to the public?
Sure. Well, I certainly agree with the values around, transparency and inclusion and consensus. I think it's really important to try to have a discussion as a commission about your organizing principles and even thinking through a mission statement and how you want to make decisions, because those sort of standard operating practices are what help get you through really hard conversations when everybody agrees to the same rules of the road. I think that if you have something in place, to help, sort of drive a third way, it's certainly going to be helpful to you, even if it feels like an abstract thing to do at this point. So our views, my values, my own personal values, and then our own commission-wide values were equity. I think, as I said, my motivation for being on the commission was to try to represent a point of view about the communities in San Diego that I knew to be true, but that may not be reflected as robustly as it needed to be in the, as we engage the public, not for lack of trying, but for barriers to public participation and the like. So really thinking about, as much as thinking about who was in the room and participating in the public comment process, also thinking as critically about who wasn't in the room was really important. We got the opportunity to adopt our own independent budget, which was really important because the budget is what allowed us to resource our values in essence. We knew we wanted to have a very robust public engagement process that made us available to all quarters of the city of San Diego across cultural and linguistic and geographic barriers. And so you can say that, but if it's not reflected in your budget and how you allocate resources, then it's going to be harder to actually execute. Independence was certainly an important value for the entire commission for obvious reasons. But I think for me in particular, because I was already steeped in politics and certainly had proximity to political influence in a way that I think some colleagues on the commission didn't. And so it became even more important, for me to try to create some daylight between the process that I was undertaking with my colleagues on the commission and really kind of the chattering class of political interests that were trying to sort of get some additional entree into the process. And of course, integrity, I think, is another value. I actually have a funny anecdote that I haven't shared because I haven't permission to share it until recently. But I was in a situation where a city council member who was a friend of mine, and it's thankfully still a good friend of mine, we could certainly not take incumbency into account. And in order to make all the different the different sort of conditions work around communities of interest and a number of other issues related to empowerment districts, we ended up moving this incumbent out of his district. And we had a little bit of an icy relationship after that, naturally. But I ended up engaging with him, working a whole lot with him, because he was been to the assembly, and now he's the mayor of San Diego. And we have a wonderful, fine relationship and something we can laugh about now. But you really do have to maintain, integrity and independence in this process as much as you can, because that's more important. And anything is surmountable with regard to relationships with politicians, if you're doing it in service of the process and the people.
Mhm. That's a great anecdote. Hit very close to home. And I know with certain committee structures as well, there's just, by design, a closer relationship with those who are in elected office. And so it's an interesting dynamic to navigate that I know in other places is very real. So, one question I have is that I know that each of you spent a lot of time in public hearings where you were hearing directly from members of the public, also reviewing testimony that came in through, emails or letters, some, again, from individuals, others that was from groups of people that were kind of stakeholder groups that were organizing and representing a broader set of their community. And just really curious, I think, one of the biggest challenges as commissioners and committee members is how to reconcile the fact that, any 5 people will have 5 different perspectives on their communities of interest and their part of the city. And how do you actually reconcile, interpret all that information and come out the other side with a cohesive set of maps that everybody can live with? So welcome your words of wisdom. I'll start with you, Cynthia. I'm sorry, you got the hot seat. We just started going first, so you're just on a roll now.
So you're definitely going to have trade-offs that you're going to have to make, and you're going to have conflicting testimony, and people are going to identify their community, and it's going to be, crossover 2/3 of somebody else's defined community. And so, at the state level, we were very, very fortunate in a way, because we had a set of rank ordered constitutional criteria, starting with the federal criteria of population equality and compliance with the Voting Rights Act. And then, a set of ranked ordered state level criteria. The one that we spent a lot of time discussing was criterion number 4, which put the boundaries of cities, counties, neighborhoods, and communities of interest all at the same level. And so, as you can imagine, some of those are kind of pretty clear, like it's pretty obvious where the county lines are, it's pretty obvious where the city boundaries are. until you realize there are strange conflicts because, for example, city boundaries are often not contiguous. So I don't know what it is. I don't remember for the city of, for Redwood City, but you know, for many cities, the dump is part of the city boundary, and it's often far away from where people live. San Francisco, you might be aware, of course, that SFO is part of the city and county of San Francisco, but it's actually not where the rest of the city is, right? So you end up, do you snake down and observe the city boundaries, or do you consider that to be part of a different community? So those were some issues that we look for feedback from people living in those communities. Like they would say, well, nobody lives at the garbage dump, so no, you don't need to observe the city boundaries in that case. In another situation, you know, people were very adamant about preserving the county lines because the, you know, past redistricting split the county in multiple ways. And in other places, like down in Southern California, there was a place called the Four Corners area, which, as you might guess, actually is an area that crosses 4 counties. And people came up and testified, and they said, well, the county lines were drawn in the 1800s. So, you know, we have a living community, and you know, we are across these 4 boundaries, and you need to keep us together. You know, do not observe the county lines. So that's the kind of, you know, very tangible feedback that, you know, you look for from the community to try to sort these out. It's a harder situation when you have, you know, different communities of interest that actually really do overlap. You know, an Asian community with a Latino community, et cetera, and it's going to be messy. And in those cases, we often, you know, we had one very particular situation where we got a different map from, you know, MALDEF representing Latino community. We got a different map from the African American Redistricting Collaborative, and then a totally different map from the, you know, the Coalition for Asia Pacific Islanders. And, you know, we kind of looked at that and we said, well, we could choose one of these or some variation of it, or you guys could choose. You know, why don't you discuss it among yourselves? And it was kind of interesting because I think it had not occurred to them to actually work it out among themselves. And we said, well, you know, we can split the baby, or we can let you split the baby. And so, you know, we'll recess and see if you want to propose something different. And that ended up being called the Unity Map. They came back the next day after clearly having worked all night and presented a compromise that they were all happy with. And I have to tell you, that made our jobs a lot easier because we were going to piss somebody off, and probably most of them. So, you know, so being creative in how to work out some of these compromises is a good thing. In other cases, you're simply going to have to make some choices. And, you know, at the city level, you might consider what issues the city can advocate and represent the interests of different communities. So if their reason for presenting this community of interest is around an issue that the city can actually mitigate or address, then it might make sense to keep them together as a community. And in other cases, you know, we were presented with all kinds of justifications as to why we should consider it one community versus another. And some of those issues were not relevant for legislative districts or congressional districts. And so those, you know, obviously had less weight than the ones that, you know, where having a member of Congress advocate on environmental issues, you know, was important. So.
Mm-hmm. So really helpful and concrete in terms of some of those examples. And I know, Carlos, you know, you were tackling all of this at the local level as well. And from what you've shared about San Diego, there are so many communities of interest and not a huge geography. And so how did you go about that task?
Well, I do think it is helpful as a commission to try to force rank some of the redistricting principles that you will learn about and some of which end up competing. Some of them are forced ranked for you, either because of case law or because of existing statutes. So you'll learn a little bit more about that process. But there, for example, you want to think about the degree of deviation in terms of population, the number of people within a given district compared to another district. You have to take that into consideration. If the deviation is, far too large, then it becomes an indefensible map entirely. So deviation becomes a pretty important consideration. Voting Rights Act issues become a really important consideration. Communities of interest as well, and you can define a community of interest, often defined by communities that come together to advocate for boundaries by their own definition. So it could be defined by a geographic feature or an airport, and a community that shares an interest around making sure that that airport doesn't dominate the quality of life within that neighborhood. It could certainly be around ethnic or a cultural identity as well. I think we also benefited at some point in the process from a coalition of once competing redistricting constituencies that did come together and produced a uniform map for us to consider that would quite elegantly balance all of the interests across the city with regard to empowerment districts and minority majority districts, which I think is one of the things that we really struggled with, but ultimately I think we were able to kind of strike the right balance. One example I can give is one of the earlier maps, just so that you have some context about San Diego. There was a historic African-American district. There was an LGBT district that we worked hard to define as a community of interest. There was a Latino district. And of course, we had to draw a 9th district, and a lot of the community, the Latino community, felt like the numbers justified a second Latino empowerment district. At the same time, the Asian Pacific Islander community felt strongly that because they had been denied the opportunity to elect their own candidates to the city council for the previous 10 years, that they finally deserved their own empowerment district. So just to recap, we had to preserve the boundaries of the historic African-American district, which was by definition shrinking by the numbers, preserve the boundaries of the LGBT district to the extent possible, preserve the integrity of the first Latino empowerment district, try to create a second one, and then create an API empowerment district, along with all the other considerations that go into a map. And one of the earlier maps to create the API district, it really took in I'm in Sacramento now, UC San Diego. And the steering committee that was advocating for the API empowerment district didn't love that map because those students can be transient and they're not always registered in San Diego. But we couldn't allow the perfect to be the enemy of the good, because that map allowed that district to be compact, contiguous, and it allowed us to achieve all the other competing interests that we were trying to achieve. And it is also up to, at some point, the folks, the stakeholders within a given city or state to try to register those voters and do the work of making the numbers work. We couldn't do all of that for them. So we did adopt a map, I think, that was able to achieve all of that. But one of the earlier maps did not make everyone very happy. And then we were able to get everyone to come together and agree to this unity concept that you heard about earlier.
Thank you for that. And I certainly have flashbacks of many maps that made a lot of people unhappy as we were kind of getting started at the state level, and feel like we landed in a good place, but it did take some trial and error and a lot of public testimony to make it very explicit where we were getting it right and wrong. Just as we close my formal questions, one kind of quick piece of advice you might have around this, mid-pandemic moment that we're still in, and this being just a different moment in terms of public engagement processes, given that many people, even as much as we're having more vaccine availability, folks may want to or prefer to participate online, et cetera. So what would be some ideas or advice you would have on that front? Cynthia, we'll start with you. Carlos, you can close us out. And then committee members would love to invite you after that to, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask of Cynthia or Carlos or myself. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Yeah, so one piece of advice that I've given to our replacements at the state level and other committees and commissions is to embrace the technology. Instead of thinking of these virtual meetings as being less than the in-person process, to try to use this technology as a way to allow more people to participate in the process. There are tons of great features like the automatic transcripting and again, allowing simultaneous translation. The fact that it is virtual means that someone doesn't have to physically travel across the city to a part of town that maybe is not as convenient for them. They don't have to wait in line for hours, to get their 2 minutes at the mic. That whole process of queuing can be managed so that they can, get their time and participate, without having to, take time off of work or personal life. So definitely take advantage of the technology. And I'm not sure what your plan is for, having these meetings, but I think most of them are going to at least be hybrid. And so just probably have someone managing the virtual queue and the in-person queue so that you make sure to give equal attention to the Zoomers versus the roomers, and make sure everyone gets their chance to listen and participate.
Yeah, I agree. Technology, as certainly I understand, feels like a hindrance to a robust public participation process, but I do agree with Cynthia that it could be a very meaningful opportunity, and also would just encourage folks to work with your nonprofit trusted partners who have roots with the communities you hope to reach, and also to think about each other as surrogates within your own communities.
That's great. Thank you both so much for sharing those thoughts. Hindsight is always 2020, so that's why I thought it'd be great to have them here, because I think we all know so much more now that we're not in the midst of the intensity of the process. So are there any folks in Redwood City who would have any questions of Cynthia or Carlos or both?
I see Lisa, your hand's up.
Yes, thank you. I was really struck by your comment that there are steep consequences for those who are not engaged in their government. And there are a lot of people who are not engaged in our government. I mean, we are the exception, I think. We're all very civically engaged. And I'm just wondering if you had any advice on how do you engage those who don't feel like any part of government is working for them. I mean, I can remember I ran for a local elected office, and I got all my lists from the county registrar's office and walked my district, and there were entire apartment buildings less than a block from my own home where not a single person was registered to vote. And there's a lot of reasons why that could be, but I'm talking hundreds of people in just one apartment building whose everything they're participating in their local government because they shop here, they work here, they live here, yet they're not being represented clearly. And it just really made me wonder, how are we going to engage these folks and to really partner with people who will also help us engage them?
Well, I think part of the good news, and I don't disagree with you that it's an immense challenge. I think part of the good news is that you have a city that's filled with really strong, a really strong civil society. We partnered with not just advocacy organizations, nonpartisan advocacy organizations, but we also partnered with service providers. A direct delivery of service to people in need, whether it be a food bank or a clinic, whatever it might be. That is where that's where the rubber meets the road, because you're accessing people at a moment of need and providing a real deliverable to them. But you can also use that intersecting moment to try to get them registered to vote, to try to get them to understand why the community development block grant, for example, that is help funding the bag of food they're getting, is very much so connected to the redistricting process. And so I think I'm a big fan of trying to connect with service providers. I had an old boss a former boss who was the CEO of a healthcare provider for whom I worked. And she used to tell me, nonprofits, they have a dual mission. They've got to pull people out of the river, and then they have to go up the riverbank and figure out who's throwing them in the river, right? It's like advocacy and service. And so I would just advise that you think about not just sort of the like traditional advocacy organizations in your community, but the service providers as well.
Yeah. And to kind of build on Carlos's point, a lot of your responsibility as community members is outreach. It's outreach and education and helping people understand why redistricting is important and why they need to engage, because it means, significant amounts of public funding and taxpayer resources going, into their district or not. So at the state level, we had a very diverse commission. I always got deployed to the API community, as you might imagine. And, I struggled at first with, how do Asian Americans, traditionally have very low political engagement rates compared to other ethnic groups. And so it's like, how do I get people to care? If somebody else was not inspired by their 5th grade, history teacher, like I was. For me, the issue was education. I mean, it sounds kind of trite, but every Asian American parent cares about that. And so I use that issue to engage. I'm like, don't you care if your children get into Berkeley or Stanford? Then that means you want really good public schools. And guess who funds good public schools? So this is why you need to be involved, and you need to tell us about your community and what the needs are, so that you can make sure that you have representation for your interests. And so just translate that to city level issues, or what are the things. I was actually an enumerator for the census this summer, and believe me, I did a lot of apartment buildings where there was that lack of engagement. But I would say, don't you want that pothole fixed in the road, in the front there? I mean, this is why you need to be counted. And, for the census, it was to stand up and be counted, right? But it's just a little bit more to get registered to vote, and, a little bit more to show up at a public hearing, and maybe not even themselves, but work with an organized group that might show up and represent your interests at a public hearing. And I agree with Carlos. I mean, the census took big advantage of the food banks and whatever to get the word out and to get people counted that way.
Thank you, Carlos and Cynthia. We have 3 minutes left before we have to adjourn. Daniela has her hand up. Danny, if you want to ask your last question.
Sure. One really quick one. So many of us on the call probably remember our city going through redistricting for the first time about 3 years ago. And it just, everything that the three of you were talking about reminded me of the passionate conversations about setting those maps. Is it important for the committee members who perhaps didn't have a lot of information about what we went through 3 years ago to sort of get copies of meeting minutes, maybe sample or the final 6 maps that were drawn 3 years ago, any public comment, city minutes, or is it best for everyone to start fresh, erase the past, pretend it's a brand new day and we don't remember a thing?
So for the state level, the answer was easy because there had been, decades of bipartisan gerrymandering at the state level. So we started from scratch. So it really depends on what your last process was, if you want to look at it.
Right. I think it's a decision that you all can make as individually, or if it's something that you think is important to adopt as a commission in terms of your overall approach. I think it's important to look back because I was really focused on who is not in the room. What arguments are we hearing from the same steering committees that literally have always been well-heeled and just dusted the same membership list off and the same list, the same, all the things, and showed up? I wanted to know who wasn't in the room, and there were a lot of people who weren't in the room the first go around, who we had to work with our community partners to get in the room. So that's one instructive thing that I thought was important for looking back. But you can't jeopardize necessarily the public record that you're actually over as a commissioner today for decisions of the past. I certainly am not suggesting that, but I do think it's helpful to internalize for yourself the historical context of what the city's gone through.
It'll come up as you do your hearings. So to be proactive in just getting a lay of the land so that you're also not blindsided, because you will hear if there are grievances or concerns or issues that felt unresolved or unaddressed. Hopefully the public process is one where people feel like they can speak to those issues, but it is really helpful to get the perspective from those who are in that process, just so you can be more informed as you go about in doing it this new way as a committee. So thank you so much for your time. We wish you all the best, and we are all connected with redistricting partners and glad to be a resource as you move along the process. And just thank you so much for your service. It'll be a really rewarding opportunity that just makes you love Redwood City even more.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Carlos. Appreciate all the time and service that you've given us in the past.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
All right, we are at time. So I want to thank everyone for joining, and congratulations to everyone, all of us who got sworn in. Today, just a reminder, our next meeting is July 28th. And again, if you're not able to attend, make sure you let the city know 5 days in advance that you won't be able to attend the following meeting. So thank you very much. And with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Good night, y'all.
Good night, everybody.
All right, thank you, everyone. See you guys July 28th. Great job.